I basically, swore off medication at that point because of the amount of trauma that I had experienced. I think the best initiation is...
What's happening, leprechauns? In this video, I am interviewing a lovely man who got diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia in 2010. He later re-diagnosed himself as Sacredphrenia. This man's name is Jacob, and we have a very interesting conversation, to say the least. Welcome, Jacob. Thank you so much for coming on to the podcast.
Thanks for having me, Layo. It's an honor. I love what you're doing. I'm a big fan. And there's a lot of resonance between what we speak about. So happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Fuck yeah, man. I love it. Sorry for swearing for all viewers that don't like swear words, but we're going to have plenty more of that. Jacob, I mentioned briefly there about Sacredphrenia, the term that you discovered. Could you please, for the listeners who don't know what Sacredphrenia is, describe it?
Absolutely. And I'm so glad you used the word discovered, because I don't think of myself as having created this word. I actually feel that it came to me in July of 2018. I was searching for a word that would encapsulate the profound journey that I had been on. I certainly was not a fan of the word schizophrenia.
No.
I originally actually thought of using the word shamanphrenia. The name of my project / business almost became shamanphrenia, but there was a day when the word Sacredphrenia came to me, and I felt like the heavens had opened up, and it was like this wonderful, experience. But yeah, I'm really glad that the word has resonated with, many people. I've heard many people tell me that it feels better to use that word than to, use the word schizophrenia or other medical terminology that can be confining at times and can be sort of limiting, especially when you consider how much stigma has accrued in Western culture surrounding those labels. It's nice to have an alternative that feels more uplifting and feels more empowering. Yeah.
100%. It definitely breaks barriers, doesn't it? And it allows for optimism and hope, which isn't there with the diagnoses that, not only the psychiatrist puts on us, but society puts on us as a whole. I listened to your first public speech. One of the first questions you asked the audience was, whenever you hear the word schizophrenia, what is it comes to your mind? There is commonalities for everyone that comes to mind, such as what the movies portray of it. And the movies really do portray a poor side to the story, which is not realistic for people that have actually experienced those psychotic episodes. And yet with psychotic episodes, they're nearly, I think pretty much all of us have the commonality of it being a spiritual experience. So with your Sacredphrenia experience, can you tell me about the audience, can you tell us about the spiritual aspect of it within your own experience? Like, how was it spiritual?
Oh, what a good question. I don't think I've ever been asked that question. Awesome. in an interview, so this will be fun. And yes, the word Sacredphrenia does imply spirituality. That's part of it as well. That word sacred implies a mystical quality of this psychic opening, which is, as you say, true for so many of us, whether we realize it or not. I think a number of people who are diagnosed with schizophrenia and similar conditions are experiencing something very spiritual and not necessarily recognizing it. In my case, I did recognize it. partly because I was already so immersed in a spiritual outlook and a spiritual way of being. You know, I had become very interested in spirituality about a year before my breakdown took place in 2010. So in 2009, I became very interested in, first of all, like Christianity, which is my ancestral form of spirituality. I mean, the religion that my immediate ancestors practiced. But then it did branch off into a more like sort of new age form of maybe new age spirituality mixed with Christianity, a more progressive form of Christianity, like which was Episcopalianism. So
Sorry, what's that?
yeah,
Episcopalianism?
that is a Protestant sect of Christianity. So it's like
Ah, okay. See, being a dirty Catholic, I wouldn't know that.
right. I know. I forgot you live in Ireland.
Yeah, well, it's actually half and half.
Actually, that's true. Yeah, now that I think about it, right.
Yeah. I'm sorry for cutting you off. Your Episcopalianism.
It's funny. I heard you say Episcopalianism as though you're pissing on on my family's religion.
Sorry, that's the unconscious sectarianism.
Right? I know that's hundreds of years of religious wars playing out in our conversation. And that's the thing, like honestly, so many sacred phrenics, as I call them, or sacreds, really do channel like interdimensional and intergenerational psychic material. So I wouldn't be surprised if there was some, ancestral like animosity coming through there. Yeah, something like that. Who knows? Yeah. But no, for the most part, I consider myself a new age type of spiritualist, and with Christian tones. But really, what I'm attempting to say is that I got really into mysticism. It came very naturally for me. This was in 2009, and it was about a year of healthy exploration before I did end up encountering some very toxic belief systems that were on the internet. That was bound to happen eventually. Me being very curious and open-minded, but not having many boundaries, not having much discernment at that time. I wasn't able to process many of the conspiracy theories that I ended up encountering in a healthy way. And that is when I suffered my breakdown. Is when I I found myself on the deep end of the internet, where people wear tinfoil hats.
Like the Wizard of Oz.
Yeah, it doesn't go well for people who are prone to extreme paranoia, such as myself, if I'm not careful.
If you're comfortable talking about it, could you describe the conspiracy hole that you went down? I have like pretty much zero knowledge of the vast majority of conspiracy theories. Whoa, what's up? What's up?
He doesn't like conspiracy theories either, I guess. Or he doesn't, maybe he
doesn't like conspiracy theories, yeah. What's up, man? I don't know what happened there.
That was a moment, yeah. Maybe she was responding to that aspect of my story, when I started speaking about the dark stuff. I mean,
maybe.
And we're talking about spirituality. I'm realizing I didn't exactly answer your question. And I would, of course, love to dive further into conspiracy stuff if you wish. But
let me reintroduce it then.
Okay, so let me take myself back. I was speaking about a little bit about my journey, about how I experienced the breakdown. And yeah, through that process in which I lost my grip on this reality, I lost the plot, so to speak. I retained a sense that this was a kind of spiritual process, that there was a deeper process happening. I wasn't sure exactly what it was, but I could tell that this was an opportunity for me to really come to terms with my soul. And so, yeah, when I received the diagnosis in 2010 of paranoid schizophrenia, I rejected it. I rejected it for years until eventually I found it was useful to have some label that helped me to like categorize my symptomology, so I could know, you know, what direction to head in terms of treatment and that sort of thing. But yeah, for the most part, I looked at myself as being more spiritually sensitive than the average person, being more prone to an influx of psychic material from the universe, you know, playing itself out through me in different ways. And yes, I mean, like, to this day, I continue to have what you could call like transliminal experiences. These are experiences where I'm aware of the unconscious more than the average person, I guess you could say. I don't actually hear voices so much. That this is the classic symptom that people think of when they think of, you know, schizophrenia. Yeah. I tend to see signs and experience synchronicities and have a very vivid dream life and things of this nature. Occasionally, I will see something that you know, a typical person will not see, or I'll hear something that a typical person won't hear.
Do you have any examples of that?
One is that I hear ringing in my ears quite frequently on either the left or the right side.
Same.
Yeah, this is something that opened up for me on a very specific day in 2018. So obviously, you know, many years into my journey. And I immediately recognized it as a way in which spirit was communicating with me. It's been very, very useful for me, actually. It helps me to navigate reality. I'm very grateful for it.
So that's a new concept for me. How do you do that?
I was able to pick up on a pattern fairly quickly, in which I observed that when I got ringing in my left ear, it was spirit telling me to ignore something, or to be wary of something, or to give something a little bit less attention. Whereas if I got the ringing in my right ear, it was spirit telling me to pay extra attention to something, or to go towards something, a little bit more affirmative versus like negative on the, and it's not a completely black and white thing. I've had to learn over time that it's not binary necessarily. Yeah. Like it's more of a suggestion. And I think it's helpful for anyone who is attempting to relate with spirit in different ways to be very like open-minded and open-ended about it, not to like not to have some formula that is too strict in terms of like what something means, or how spirit is attempting to communicate something with you. But I like to think that because I had done enough work doing spiritual clearing, in the years between 2010 and 2018, it means that when I did begin to hear things, I mean, it may be different than hearing voices, but I like to think that I was able to have a more sort of stable or pure form of communicating with spirit, or having spirit communicate with me, versus what happens in so many cases, which you speak about, you know, where the voices will come in and they'll be very chaotic and very contradictory and confusing. Obviously, you know, I did go through my own version of that for years, in which my thoughts were extremely chaotic and destructive and self-harming. But I'd been able to work through so much of that by the time the ringing came in. I think I was able to have a more enjoyable experience. Yeah.
Awesome. So there's lots of good stuff in that. I want to go back to, so I want to touch on your spiritual journey from 2010 to 2018, where you had a spiritual clearing, you refer to it as, right? I want to touch on that. Before I touch on that, I want to ask you one quick question about the ringing noise on the left or the right ear, whatever it is. Your conclusion to the view that I think it was your left ear is like avoid this and your right ear is go towards this, right? Is that right?
Roughly, yeah.
Did you come to terms with that through your intuition?
For the most part, I remember attempting to connect the dots intuitively at the time, because it was taking place so frequently. I knew something was happening. And I tend to look for meaning in things. I tend to assume that there's a reason for, you know, these things to be occurring. That maybe a purpose of some kind. But I ended up doing some online searching and finding that this is a view that certain people have had in ancient China in particular, that ear ringing can correlate with guidance from the universe, or the Tao, or yeah, something of that nature. Yeah. So that helped when I found that.
That was fascinating. Do you have any resources for that? Like, did you just come across on the internet, or?
Yeah, I don't. I wish I had, you know, a specific person who speaks about that or something. I'd have to go back and find what that was. It was fairly obscure. It wasn't like, you know, right in the Tao Te Ching or something like that.
Yeah, no, I've read the Tao Te Ching, but a lot of it is metaphorical, and like, you know, like it says, like the river is life, and you know, good and bad. There's similarly though in the Tao Te Ching, you have to look at each paragraph. You have to look for the meaning in the paragraph. Similarly to the way that you're looking for the meaning in the ringing in your ears. Whenever I experienced the ringing in my ears during my peak psychosis, I don't know if you know this. I don't think I've actually ever talked about it in a video before, but I believed the ringing in my ear was because there was a device in my ear where MI5 were able to read my thoughts. Either MI5 or KGB or one of those.
Okay.
And I was certain that because I had this ringing in my ears, it was because there was a device in my ears, and like I could feel something moving in my ear. And quite recently, I got the wax removed from my ears. Oh man, you should have seen it. It was fucking stinking. Like took out like this much wax.
What?
So from both ears. And
Oh,
it was
grody.
proper, man, proper. But after it, like I still experienced the ringing in my ears. So I just presumed that it was tinnitus, but I don't know. You know,
I don't think so. I think it's a psychic thing. I really do. I've heard about this phenomenon occurring in a number of people who I'm close with in the spiritual realm. I mean, and they view it in a typical way where they don't necessarily see it in that exact way in which, you know, left means ignore something, right means pay attention to something. That may be particular to me. And I have to say, like, after sharing that, I actually felt a little bit sad, as though I had possibly shared something that was sacred, you know, and not necessarily meant to be shared. I'm sure you can relate with that, how there are some things that are meant for us alone. But I sat with it a little more, and I decided, well, you know, what if this helps someone? What if there's someone out there who has a similar experience and hasn't been able to make sense of it?
Yeah,
I think in that case, it would be perfect that this is being said.
Yeah, I just want to briefly touch on that, what you felt whenever you said that. So, from my understanding of what you're describing of how you felt whenever that was, say, those words released out of you, it sounds to me like my version of slight anxiety. And if you look deeper at what anxiety is like the unknown, right? A fear of the unknown. And so maybe that is your unconscious telling you that this is an unknown you're trying to put a known to.
Yeah.
Does that resonate with you?
Yeah, I think it does, in that I hear myself, you know, speaking out loud ideas that have been private for very long and like somewhat ethereal. Like, and you know, that's why it's difficult to, like, I attempted to create an entire business out of Sacredphrenia and achieved some success. I don't mean to discount that at all, but like at the end of the day, I've ended up realizing that it's very difficult to create concrete formulas out of something that is so ethereal and so particular to each person. Like that may be another way in which Sacredphrenia is sacred, is that we each have our own experience of it, and like no diagnosis, you know, no psychiatric preparation or anything can touch that, you know. Like we each have our own experience. Did that make sense?
Yeah, it did. Yeah. Everyone's own experience is true to their own self.
But then we do find commonalities. Like one thing I failed to mention is that when this ear ringing opened up for me in 2018, it was preceded by a horrendous experience in which I don't think I've ever shared any of this before in a public forum. My eardrum actually burst immediately preceding it. So I had a night of absolute agony, like maybe the worst pain I've ever felt, like physical pain acutely. I literally was like laying in bed with pus coming out my ear. It felt like somebody had shot me in the ear, and I wasn't able to go to the ER until several hours later. But it did turn out that I had like an infection in that ear that was really severe. But that's when the ear ringing opened up, was after that experience. And I ended up finding out that a friend of mine had an exactly similar experience where her eardrum had burst. And that's when she had begun hearing voices that were positive voices. So that was like really illuminating for both of us when we found that someone else had that exact experience. So of course it's like very, very useful, for people to hear these stories and to find where they relate with theirs.
Yeah. Wow. That is a bizarre commonality right there. Wow. I hope that doesn't happen to me.
I mean, it's worth it though, when you consider, what. I don't think you need it though. I mean, it sounds like you've already opened up psychically. You hear the ringing, and you hear, well, you've heard voices in the past. So
I still do sometimes.
okay. Maybe I didn't know that.
Yeah, they're not as frequent, nowhere near. Like, Jacob, I'd like to bring it back to 2010. You rejected the label schizophrenia from the offset. Is that right?
Yes, I thought it was absolute nonsense when I heard it. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. And from then on, can you tell me about, okay, so it was 8 years of a journey. So can you summarize that into a couple of minutes, which is probably going to be extremely difficult considering it's 8 years long, and I'm sure you could probably write a book on this. And then I'd also like you to touch on your use of antipsychotic medication.
Sure. Well, first of all, there wasn't any use of antipsychotic medication. I avoided it like the plague. And as I always say in these interviews, everyone has their own journey and their own needs. And some people may end up taking antipsychotics and benefiting from taking them, hopefully temporarily. Hopefully they can use them as a temporary crutch in order to stabilize enough that they can formulate a game plan for their recovery. In my case, I am still very chemically sensitive. I'd had a negative experience with a previous psychiatric medication, which was, well, I had tried, I think, 2 SSRIs previously when I'd had a little bit of anxiety. At the very first year of college, I'd had some separate issues, and the side effects were so severe for me when I tried those SSRIs initially that I basically, swore off medication at that point. It was like, it didn't feel like an option because the side effects were worse than the actual, symptoms that I'd been experiencing at that time earlier. So, and that had launched me into a more natural approach to solving my health challenges. And that's when I began experimenting with nutrition and supplementation and things of that nature. So fortunately, I was already in that mindset when I experienced my breakdown in 2010. I'd already been, eating organically for a year, and I was starting to experiment with, being a vegetarian and things of that nature. So I was really fortunate in that sense. I also, I also lived with two very open-minded parents, two very loving, open-minded, fairly holistic parents who didn't necessarily want me to be, taking these heavy-duty antipsychotic medications. I mean, certainly the psychiatrist wanted me to, but my parents were open to me going a different route as long as I didn't go too far off the deep end. So like I was really walking this tightrope for many years, in which I was aware that if I didn't keep myself in check enough, it was possible that I would enter the mental health system, and maybe I would be hospitalized, and maybe I would be forced to take, psychiatric meds. But I thank my lucky stars to this day that somehow I was able to go a more natural route and to do everything in my power, certainly drawing on the help of many people around me, to keep myself stable enough that never became necessary for me to enter a hospital. And I recognize now that perhaps that means that my condition, so-called condition, whatever you want to call it, was more mild than some people. Some people are so ungrounded and so lost in the sauce that they have no choice but to get, they get tackled and sedated, whether they want to or not. It's like I recognize that there's a certain amount of privilege in my case, that I need to be mindful of. Yes. So to summarize my 8-year, or really by now like 11-year journey, but especially 6, 7, 8-year journey. Those initial 6, 7, 8 years were the most challenging years. To summarize that journey, it took me about 2 or 3 years before I began to discover things that really could put a damper on the severe paranoia that I was experiencing, that was so horrendous. It's impossible to put into words. It was, and this, it's like when you're in a state of psychosis like that, my entire reality was adrenaline filled. It was like somebody had a gun to my head all the time. Like the amount of fight or flight that I felt was extreme. I was in an extreme state for those 2 to 3 years. And again, somehow was able to, retain enough sanity so that it was mostly concealed to the outside world. It was like inside, I was absolutely frothing. I was like teeming with this agonizing paranoia, but mostly kept it to myself. Mostly sat in my room and researched these conspiracy theories and attempted to find ways in which I attempted to find threads that I could follow that would give me some peace of mind. Like I would learn about some archangel, or I would learn about some person who was investigating paranormal matters, who had a more positive way of looking at all of it. But my mind obsessed on the dark, like the darkest stuff I could find, basically stuff about aliens, demons, hell realms, whatever was the most disturbing stuff, my mind would like magnetize to it and obsess over it all the time. And so, yeah, it took years to climb out of that and to recognize that I have to be very conscious about what I put inside of my head. Like still to this day, I don't go out of my way to, read really disturbing stuff. Like I know enough now that I'm capable of descending into the depths. I can do it when necessary. But I also have to be mindful about who I spend time with and what books I read. And, I'm constantly filling my cup with good stuff, for the most part now. About 3 years in, I met a shaman who really helped me, especially in terms of doing some of that spiritual clearing that I spoke about earlier.
Yeah.
I mean, she like helped piece my energy body back together, which had fractured. Like my actual soul in some ways had splintered off because of the amount of trauma that I had experienced. And so it was necessary for her to journey on my behalf and to bring pieces of me back together. I turned a real corner at that time. And I turned a few corners, each one was really necessary. Several of them involved systems of detoxification, like healing diets and protocols. I did a number of, fasting regimens, and we could get into that if you wish, but
I'd like to go back to that. There's so much you touched on there,
right,
that I'm fascinated about. First of all, there is a commonality between people with psychosis and them delving towards the darker things. Quite often, on like Reddit threads or sometimes my YouTube comments, I would get people commenting saying that my voices are part of an experiment, and that like thousands of people are also in this thread and they're experiencing exactly the same thing, and everyone has to wake up because the devil has possessed our minds. And I think the reason for this is because whenever we are in that state of psychosis, we're extremely vulnerable, and we're all desperately searching for the trajectory of truth. We're all looking for not only a deeper meaning, but the real meaning behind our psychosis, because we've been lied to with so many aspects of pharmaceuticals, industries, way of labeling us with, oh, you've got symptom A, B, C, D, E. That means you've got psychosis. When we're not looking at the, the meaning of it, where it came from, why it's happened. And because I'd say we're all lost in this journey, trying to find our own way. We want to go down this path. Like, similar to you said you spend a lot of time in the internet and in your room looking up, like, what to do. I did exactly the same thing. I immediately went on to YouTube and I tried to find people that had psychosis.
right.
And funnily enough, that is how I came across you.
Oh wow.
Yeah. I found Lou and then I found you.
Uh-huh. Right.
The resources there are so limited though. In order to actually hear the experience of someone that has actually had psychosis, and it's so rare to just hear their experience, and to actually hear of the recovery is even rarer.
Right.
Which is why I think some people are going to benefit from listening to you, because you've been through the pits of hell, and you've came out and you've seen the light, and you've met other people along the way who have offered their hand to guide you through the river of life. So you mentioned about you met a shaman after 3 years. How did you meet her?
Right. Wow. Yes. It happened absolutely organically. I ran into her in a health food store that I was working in part-time, which was very beneficial for me, by the way. And that does show, you know, that I was, again, like walking that tightrope, being able to like retain enough sanity, so to speak, that I was able to, you know, show up at this job. And that's where I met this amazing shaman who changed my life, and we became dear friends. Sometimes you can't find all your answers on the internet, and I love that we have that in common. We can find many answers on the internet. I mean, I wouldn't be in this state without all of the research that I did on the internet. And trust me, 10 years ago, it was much more sparse than it is now. Like we certainly have a long way to go, you know, before the internet is like a place where people can find very reliable healing information very easily. There's too much information there, you know, it's all unorganized. Yeah,
And unorganized.
Yeah.
You really have to question everything that you come across on the internet. It's like, I said, it's probably less than a 50% chance that whatever you come across on the internet is going to be true.
That's so confusing for anyone, let alone someone experiencing psychosis where they're not sure what is up or what is down. Like, I mean, and unfortunately, a lot of thought leaders on the internet are actually contributing to people's psychosis by introducing ideas without like proper context. Like, I mean, right now the internet's rife with conspiracy theories, more so than ever. And for someone who's like in a very weak psychological state, that's the last thing that they need. So I can see why that would have been disturbing for you to read the Reddit threads talking about, you know, MK Ultra programs or whatever it was that you were reading about.
I think it was that.
Was it? Yeah.
I think so, yeah. I'm in a strong state of mind now where I'm able to define myself without any affective delusion. There was a time where I was heavily affected by delusional thoughts and even deluded by my own thoughts, but I'm getting better at that day by day.
Congratulations.
Thanks, man.
I mean, that is huge and deserves major recognition, especially given that you're relatively like young in this journey. I mean, I forget what year it was that you experienced your breakdown, but it wasn't that long ago, if I'm not mistaken.
March 2020.
Right.
Yeah.
There you go.
And I had experienced extreme paranoia in October 2019, but I refused to acknowledge that myself. I didn't tell anyone about it, and tried not to give it energy because it scared me so much. But Jacob, you touched briefly on your diet and you're experimenting with it. So you did a recent post on Instagram where you shared how many diets you have experimented with. And do you know the number, off the top of your head, how many you've experimented with?
I don't know the exact number. I believe it's over 30. I believe, yeah, it's up there. And many of them, or if not most of them, to an absolute T, where I was, like doing it full on for months at a time, if not years at a time. So thanks for recognizing, what a big deal that's been for me.
Yeah, no, it's massive, man, and I highly respect it. I also experiment with my diet, and I did a lot more experimenting whenever I was deep in psychosis. I have found one that suits me food wise, but I've not found one that suits me timing wise. Can you tell us which of the diets that you've experimented with were most beneficial to you? And before you go into that, I want to give a warning to anyone listening to well, I encourage you all to experiment yourself. However, to be careful whenever you are experimenting with it, because there can be precautions that come whenever you are experimenting with diet, and not one diet is suitable for everyone. Some people are suitable at going on a pure carnivore diet. Some people are suitable going on just a pure organic vegan diet, and it doesn't suit everyone. Everyone is unique in that way.
Yeah.
And I know we're not all able, in fact, the vast majority of us are not able to contact a dietitian to see which one is best for us. But if you experiment and listen to your gut, then you're most likely going to find what fits you the most. So I've recently found that bell peppers, for some reason, are not sitting well in my stomach. And I used to love them. That's kind of pissing me off, but that's just the way it is. But yeah, Jacob, tell us about which diets had the best effect and which diets had the worst effect for you.
Wow. Well, first of all, I don't mean to overwhelm anyone by sharing that I have attempted so many different diets. Part of it is that I'm fascinated with that side of biochemistry that relates with food intake. Like I've enjoyed acting as a mad scientist, or I could flip that and say like a sane scientist in the kitchen. And I wish that I had made certain discoveries earlier on that would have prevented me from like needing to do so much experimentation in order to feel, real relief. I guess I will share a few individual diets that were helpful and not helpful, as you asked for. But before I do that, I think I'd like to share something I found that may be helpful for somebody who's just beginning and wants to get a sense of what general category of eating would most likely be beneficial for them. And that's something called metabolic typing. I didn't find this until 2017. So this is 7 years into my eating experimentation, but metabolic typing can help you determine what constitution you have nutritionally, like what general style of eating will suit your unique body. Because as you pointed out, we're each bio-individual. One man's, what's the expression? One man's meat is another man's poison. So like me, I actually do better eating at least some animal protein, whereas other people might be allergic to certain meats. I mean, that's something that a psychiatrist named Dr. Abram Hoffer discovered, is that people with these conditions tend to have what he called cerebral allergies, which means they're like food allergies. It means that when you eat a certain thing, like maybe bell pepper in your case, your brain literally may react to that food as if it is a poison, and that can destabilize your mind. That can cause a real issue, you know, psychologically for a person. So I would say probably the diets that helped me the least were the diets that were highest in those cerebral allergies for me. Like in my case, I should not go anywhere near dairy. It is like my absolute kryptonite. If I eat even a trace of dairy, like even the most pure form of ghee, if you know, ghee is like butter that's been boiled.
Yeah, it's
And that
goats
they,
as well, right?
right, yeah, cow or
Yeah.
goat milk, I guess, can be turned into ghee, and they love it in India. It's a holy food in India.
Yeah, I love
But like even the most, like the stuff that they say is free of the casein and the lactose ghee, I can't eat it. Like it does not benefit me at all. In fact, it really can cause me to experience slight symptoms still to this day, even after all the gut healing I've done and everything like that. I need to be careful to avoid, and maybe that won't always be the case. Maybe eventually I'll be able to eat some butter and cheese and things of that nature. But yeah, like I tried, there was one diet where I did nothing but drink raw milk for like a month, I think. I mean, I was like a little baby calf drinking milk, and like it
Straight
did
off the
not
tip.
help. Yeah, just straight out, just like squirting it right into my mouth. Yeah, it did
Oh my
not
God.
do me any favors. That one, and I tried a high yogurt diet as well, where they called me like yogurt boy when I'd come into the grocery store, because I'd buy all their organic grass-fed yogurt right away. Anyway, the diets that helped me the most were, there was one called macrobiotics, which is fascinating because it's a Japanese system of healing where you look at the world in terms of energy, and you see that everything subscribes to the principle of either yin or yang. Things are either expanding or contracting. They're either a little more masculine or a little more feminine. And I learned that I was in a very yin state. And this is true for most people experiencing these psychiatric challenges. We're in a more vulnerable sort of shut down, shy, you know, yin. In some ways, you could say feminine, not to say that the feminine is always disempowered. Of course not, but most of us who experience these challenges have yet to activate the more powerful side of the feminine. Like, and really we're feminine in the sense that we're more sensitive. We're more we tend to be more soft, creative, artistic, transliminal, again, meaning like we're more empathic, more like suggestive.
Sorry, I've got to interrupt you. I forgot to ask last time, what does transliminal mean?
Oh yeah, transliminal, let's see if I can define it. Transliminal, to have a transliminal psychology means that you are aware of the subtle workings of your psychology. Like you're more aware of unconscious material. You're more aware of your dreams. If you hear voices, you could consider that a transliminal trait. Yeah, look up transliminality. It's a helpful word for me, and I didn't do a great job defining it, but
Okay,
it's a
cool.
good one to know.
Yeah, I'll check it out. Some interesting diets you did there, mate.
Yeah, macrobiotics. Another one was fruitarianism did actually help me turn a corner, believe it or not, where I was eating nothing but fruit and vegetables for months at a time. Eventually, I had to move on from it because it was making me more yin. Fruit is very yin. See how macrobiotics ended up like influencing me. I still see things in terms of yin or yang. Macrobiotics is more based around like grains and things of that nature, grains and vegetables. But the final diet I should mention is keto, which I have done like rough versions of over the years. I've eaten in a more paleo, high fat fashion. And I'm returning to that now and doing it more like scientifically now, where I'm attempting to actually get into states of what they call ketosis. And I think that for many people with psychiatric challenges, they're likely to find that ketogenic or high fat diets are very useful for them because the brain is made of fat, and we tend to have a difficult time metabolizing sugar and carbohydrates and things of that nature. So I would say tip number one is figure out what your metabolic type is. Go online, look for the metabolic typing quiz from Excel Health. I believe you can go to Excel or healthexcel.com, and they have a quiz you can take. It might cost $50. I forget. I think there is a little charge these days, but figure out what your metabolic type is, and it will probably tell you that you would do better with a high fat diet. That was what it told me years ago, and I ignored it, to my own detriment. But that might save time for a lot of people.
I've also found that the high fat diet has been beneficial for me. Low carb and high fat.
Right.
I'll not go too deep into my diet because this is about you, mate.
Well, it's interesting to me, but certainly you're free to say whatever you want or not.
I'll tell you about it and then just cut it out.
Okay.
So I mentioned to you the other day about Tim Ferriss, who describes about ketosis.
Right.
He talks about how having a high fat and low carb diet is beneficial for him. And so I experimented with that, and I found it to be good for my brain. And I tried to eat more yogurt, and then
say yogurt.
Yeah. And then my dad cooked this monkfish with yogurt, and I walked into the kitchen. I could smell the milk straight away, and I was like, "Oh no!" My dad was sitting there like just stuffing his face with it, but like, "It tastes good, Leo. Give it a try." I stuck a spoon in, and this is the only time I've ever done this with food. As soon as it touched my lip, like it just went back out. Like my body literally just could not intake it.
Right.
Then I threw up twice. Like
really?
3 hours. Yeah.
Whoa.
And only so that happened like 4 or 5 months ago. And only like last week have I experimented with yogurt again.
Wow.
Didn't sit well in my stomach. I have had a historical abusive relationship with dairy, where like I've gone out in rashes and like I even had a black eye from an allergic reaction once from dairy.
Right.
So it just doesn't sit well with me. And anytime I eat ice cream, it comes back up.
Wow. Bad news bears. If that doesn't teach you your lesson, I don't know what will. That's That's good to know, man. Yeah, I
You're
think
right.
it's not meant for so many of us. I mean,
Not,
it's
especially the way like the cows are treated.
right.
Like in Ireland, a lot of them get it pretty good because they're all 90% of them are grass fed.
Hmm.
So actually, like millionaires in the States import their butter from Ireland because it's that good.
Wow. Yeah, we've
Uh,
heard that. I mean, that's why Kerrygold is so famous.
yeah, exactly. It's
Mhm.
great butter too.
Cool. You do eat butter?
Yeah, I fry my
Right.
eggs with it.
Mhm.
That's about
Cool.
it. Sometimes put it on a bit of bread, but I try to avoid bread. Bread always makes me feel bloated and heavy. Also with meat, I've not had meat for like, man, it was probably like 10 days there. I didn't have any meat. And then today I got a burrito and like just my intuition was like, I fancy a bit of beef.
Mm,
And I got beef and I felt great after it. So, like just my body responding to it.
right.
But on the topic of macrobiotics, have you heard of psychobiotics?
Yeah, referring to like probiotics having a beneficial psychiatric effect. Is that what you mean by psychobiotics?
That's partially of it.
Mhm.
Uh, the psychobiotics part is the brain gut health relationship.
Mhm. Right.
And so there's been many of studies that show that your gut affects your brain health.
Right.
And so I listened to a podcast on, and there's two guys from Ireland who actually study it. And from their studies, they discovered that the best diets are the Mediterranean and the Japanese. And the reason for this is because they eat a lot of oily fish, uh, a little bit of red wine, lots of olive oil, and they eat fermented foods.
Mhm.
So that reminds
Mhm.
me, I wanted to ask you, do you eat any fermented foods?
Not currently. I have delved into eating quite a bit of fermented foods. I used to make my own sauerkraut, which is
Awesome.
the best thing you can do. I mean, if you're finding benefit from eating fermented foods, I would encourage anyone or whoever that is to make their own fermented foods because it's a whole other level. I mean, you don't get me wrong, you can get some great fermented foods from the grocery store, but when it's in your home, it's like freshly fermented. It's teeming with that beneficial bacteria. So that was helpful for me at many points. I haven't been eating them lately because, to be totally honest, I'm experiencing some gum issues, and my teeth are sensitive to fermented foods right now. Like they hurt a little bit. My teeth hurt if I eat too much sauerkraut or things of that nature. I'll occasionally have some like cashew yogurt, which is great. There are some good brands coming out. Coconut cashew yogurt, I think, is the one I've been having lately.
That's tasty.
Good stuff. Yeah. But you're
Nice.
right. The Japanese eat a lot of fermented foods, and macrobiotics definitely incorporated that into their system.
Hello, leprechauns. This is a message for you. Thank you so much for watching these videos and supporting them. I am so grateful for you. On average, I'm spending between 10 to 20 hours on these videos each week. This work that I'm doing, I see it as a voluntary service. However, because it is volunteering, I'm not getting paid for it. And due to this, I'm starting a Patreon. If you like these videos, then please consider supporting me. All I'm asking for is as little as 10p a day. 10p or 10 cents. 10p, it's such a little amount of money. If you dropped 10p out of your pocket, you probably wouldn't even notice it. But if you gave me that 10p,
it would really make a difference to my life. It will encourage me to keep on regularly making these videos because, one, I love doing this, and two, I can see that it does help some of you, and I am so grateful for every single one of you. In the Patreon, we're going to have 3 different packages. The first package is the 10p a day, the second package is the 20p a day, and the third package is the 30p a day. All options are not that much. If you think you wouldn't miss 10, 20, or 30p a day, then the link is in the description. You'll be helping me out so much. Thank you for helping me, Leprechaun.
Oh, Jacob, within your recovery community, can you tell us about the importance of community for your recovery, and maybe mention some of the benefits that meeting other people that have experienced similar experiences to you has benefited you? So the benefit of community and what kind of people have been beneficial for you.
Absolutely. I mean, community has been central to my recovery slash transmutation, whatever we want to call it, metamorphosis.
Yeah.
Sometimes the word recovery doesn't go far enough, in my opinion. Like it implies that we have made it back to our starting point, and it ignores the fact that we may be further along than we were at our starting point. Like we may be entirely new beings with something fresh to offer the world. But I also recognize that recovery in itself, like recovering a state of mind that is healthy and enjoyable, that in itself is a major, accomplishment. So people should be acknowledged for that. And yes, like fortunately, I did encounter some people through my 11-year process who had recovered. It wasn't like that. It wasn't that common to find these people, as you've pointed out, like on the internet. Unfortunately, I think a lot of people who recover don't necessarily like make a big deal out of it, or they don't go online and create, a platform where they speak about it or something like that. I'm not entirely sure why that is. Maybe it's partly because of the stigma. They don't want to be associated with mental illness in any form or something. Yeah, but like it really took me, it wasn't until 2017 that I found an actual community that was like a tribe that I felt I was an integral part of. Like previous to that, community for me was a little more spread out. Like I would meet this person, through that health food store I was speaking about earlier, and they would connect me with this other person. And I had these little pods, all over the place that I was able to draw on and experience healing through. But in 2017, when I feel like I came into a real community, which is here in Reno, I live in Reno, Nevada, and there's a beautiful like culture that's coming out of the woodworks out here, like somewhat underground, but growing, of people who are doing the healing work and developing along the spiritual path. Like my healing skyrocketed around that time when I became friends with some of these people, and over the last 4 years since then, it's been like really, what's the word that I want? It's been sped up. It's accelerated, the healing that had already been taking place. So there is a need for for more community in the psychiatric spaces, you know, the sacred psychiatric spaces, people who are experiencing these different flavors of consciousness that are often really difficult. Like, I attempted to create that community about 2 years ago, and to be honest, I wasn't in a place where I could really be available for such a large number of people. You know, I had a little Facebook group, but it was too much for me. Like, I was burning out, which is something that I have to be careful of, since I'm still technically healing. Like, my body is still recovering from the amount of trauma that I experienced. If I take on too much, I find that I get fatigued. So like, I really hope to be a person who can connect other people, you know. I mean, like, look at the networking we're doing right now, and the way that this conversation will branch out and touch other conversations and other people. I love that I get to be a part of this, and in that sense, I think we're creating community. But
Yeah.
I long for, you know, more spaces where that happens at a more rapid pace, because that's necessary. Like, our world is crying out for people experiencing these challenges to develop and to come into their gifts. That's part of why I call this Sacredphrenia as well, because these people are needed in their activated form. Like, they need to become shamans and healers and artists and change makers, so that we can really, like, help usher in the new era. Like, historically, it has been people like us who have done that. People who are more transliminal, again, like, we're more aware of the subtle myths and the subtle ecologies than the average person.
Fuck yeah, man. I resonate with that a lot.
I am also longing for that community, and I believe it will come one day.
You certainly seem like a candidate for a leader, you know, within this field. Like, you.
Yeah, I really hope so, man. I try to contact the National Health Service of Northern Ireland because I wanted to contribute in that way. I wanted to create a community for people with psychosis. And I got told, like, oh, like, if you want to do that, you've got to become a peer support worker first, so you can do like a one-to-one session with a person with psychosis. And guess what? It's fucking near impossible to do because the health system is just a total shambles. So
Yeah,
I
that's why I created Sacredphrenia. One reason is, like, that the system is so overloaded with bureaucracy. You have to create new avenues for people. Yeah,
we do, don't we? Jacob, I got another quote from your public speaking gig that you did. And one of the quotes was, you said that in the past that people like you and me, we would have been taken off to a shaman and given, you know, help and advice and support and monitoring. And one of the things we would have done then is, well, maybe even all men would have done this, is we would have been initiated through a rite of passage. So, hypothetically speaking, in an ideal world, what initiations will you have us do?
wow, that's such a good question. I love it. Yeah, I mean, really, what you're referring to with that speech that I gave, I started Sacredphrenia with this program. It was a 4-month coaching program that I put people through, and my intention was for it to be an actual initiation for people, like somewhat resembling what may have existed in indigenous cultures. Of course, I'm not an indigenous person. I am like sick of people appropriating indigenous culture. It happens all the time. And so I need to be really like wary, really careful, really really like nuanced in what I say about that. But I mean, I really think that indigenous people provide the best model for what a classic initiation is, because it's built right into their cultures. Like they understand that without providing such rites of passage, a man or a woman will never achieve a mature state of consciousness and therefore be proper stewards of the land and of the culture. So like in my own very white way, like my own very Western, like very, you know, very like first world way, I attempted to patch together these different categories of healing, and to so these are the categories that were the most important for me in my journey. They were gut healing, trauma release, spiritual clearing, and detoxification. And so I had people go through a series of practices and modalities that would assist them in achieving healing within those different categories. And to be honest, it was very difficult to hold people to that, like especially people who were already experiencing a kind of initiation in itself. Like I actually think of Sacredphrenia as a rite of passage that has its different stages that are built into it. It really has a life of its own. It has like a mind of its own. And if you don't interfere with it too much, it will actually naturally guide a person through many of these different steps, many of these different categories of healing, which is what I like to think happened in my case. It's like I was being guided by the illness itself. Although, of course, I did have like actual guides, like physical people as well. But like, I mean, you asked me like, what would be an ideal initiation? I wish I could say that there was one that was like a perfect formula. I attempted to create that, and it was really rewarding, and there were some people who really benefited from having that structure. And like there was one client in particular who I had who was like so gung-ho about it. He did every step, and he really achieved some amazing transformation in the time that I worked with him. He really like made a dramatic recovery. It was really beautiful to witness, and it showed me that it is possible for people to do this within a fairly short span of time. But the truth is, for most people in a relatively fractured state of consciousness, it's going to be hard to put them through like a kind of boot camp unless they have really abundant resources and their families are like really on board. It can happen, and I like to think that it will happen more and more. I've had to take a step back from Sacredphrenia as a health coach because it was a little disjointed. Like the clients that I had were wonderful people, and I'm grateful for every single one of them. But many of them were not in a place where they were ready to do what I was hoping that they would. So it's really been a humbling experience. It's been like, it's caused me to see how I have like romanticized this this thing that I call sacredphrenia. You know, I like to say it's sacred, and like, you know, the reality is the like on the boots on the ground reality for so many people is like it's fucking horrific. It's trauma and scarcity and like darkness, and it's hard to reach people like that, especially if, you know, they don't have the resources that it can take. So, you know, this has been like a very long-winded way of saying that I think the best initiation is the one that spirit provides each person. Like when we don't have ritual and we don't have tribe in our culture, that is able to provide like a very structured initiation, which would be more ideal. And I think that more spaces are emerging where that is going to happen. Like, for instance, I'm in a men's group right now where that is being provided. It's absolutely beautiful, led by Ian Wilkes. It's called The Embodied King, and he's a part of the organization called Sacred Sons. That might be something that men might look into if they're interested in this idea. And of course, women have their own gatherings, their own circles. I don't have one that's coming to me right now, like the name of an initiation for women. But for a person who's like well enough, I think something like Sacred Sons or the Embodied King would be a fantastic way for them to get in touch with their core masculinity, and go through a kind of rite of passage. But to return to what I was saying, to finish answering your question, and again, this has been a little bit circuitous, but spirit will provide initiation like organically, whether you like it or not, in the absence of culture, in the absence of like good culture. You know, you can still find rites of passage. Like they may be a little bit more private, they may be a little more like individualistic, like more internal. But certainly if you've been developed with something like schizophrenia, there's your initiation right there. Like, I think of it as a hero's journey. I think it has the same arc as the hero's journey that Joseph Campbell described. And if you simply like tune deep into your core and listen beyond all the noise. And of course, there's a lot of noise in these cases. It's a tall order. I'm not saying it's easy, but if you continue along the path and you continue to pray and you continue to persevere over time, I really feel that it can result in real psychological, spiritual transformation, which is what an initiation is all about. An initiation is something that takes you outside of the ordinary tools that you have, and you recognize that you no longer can draw upon the old tools that sustained you for so long. You find yourself in an absolutely new environment, like with no framework for it. It's just like, what the hell is this place? That's an initiation. And if you can eventually find new tools that support you in this new environment, and you can come into your own in that place, congratulations, you've been initiated. I mean, I could say that to you right now. The fact that you're sitting here with a great head on your shoulders, speaking inspiration to people after having lost your mind. You've been initiated, my friend. Like, congratulations. That is the most beautiful thing for me to see. I love nothing more than like witnessing metamorphosis. So
yeehaw.
yeah, brother. We're doing it.
Thanks very much, man. That was a beautiful answer. The hero's journey. I'm currently reading it. It's taking me fucking ages to read it.
You're actually reading it. Wow, I love that.
It's down here.
Is it the Masks of God, that one, or is it actually called The Hero's Journey?
It's The Hero with a Thousand Faces.
That's the one, right?
Yeah.
Good book.
Wow, good for you, man. I mean, I've never actually read that book.
It honestly, it is difficult. It's very difficult. It's taken me fucking ages to read it.
Right.
One of the stories in it is of initiations in an Aboriginal tribe, and whenever, I think it's, don't quote me on this, but whenever someone dies, one of the initiations is you have to drink their blood and eat a bit of their meat.
Whoa.
Like Western Australia or something like that, some Aboriginal tribe. I can't remember if it's whenever they die, but there's definitely cannibalism going on there. And another initiation is Nelson Mandela. Have you read his autobiography?
No.
I recommend it, man. It's one of the best books I've ever read. So he was brought up in a Zulu tribe. I think it was Zulu? Not sure. He was brought up in a tribe, and part of his initiation was he had to get his foreskin removed with a rock. And the initiation is, like, you're not allowed to show any emotion during this. And you're like 13 years old. And so, like, you have to prepare for it. You have to do like a week's training in preparation for this. And then you get it cut off with it like a fucking rock, man. To your foreskin.
What? I can't even fathom that.
Ah, man. Neither can I. And he gets his fucking foreskin ripped off. Blood everywhere. And then he has to go off and see the witch doctor for some reason. Can't remember the full ins and outs of it. But he actually does say that it did make him stronger. Now, I'm not suggesting anyone with schizophrenia goes on and fucking cuts their foreskin off.
Yeah, be careful what you say, man.
Yeah,
people are suggestible in these spaces.
Yeah, definitely do not do that.
Yeah.
I think I'm gonna cut
Yeah.
with
I mean, dude, I think it'd be fine to keep it in, but it's like, it just reminds you how brutal existence can be outside of our like very controlled, very tame Western culture. Like, and that is actually, that's something we have to come to terms with. And I think part of the suffering that we're facing in our culture is like, it's like the pain that we haven't processed in a more ritual fashion. Like they will do it in a more condensed form. It's coming out in other ways. So we're being initiated in a more long-term like process. I would prefer to do it in a more compact, like ritualized version. That's actually more ideal, because then you don't have to waste half your life like wandering around in a miserable state of consciousness. Not to say that they don't experience, suffering in other ways in those cultures, but yeah, it's really bizarre to think about, man. Like I can't even wrap my head around some of those rituals. I mean, you've probably heard about the ones. There's the famous sun dance where American Indians will, or Native Americans, I should say, will like hang themselves from tree branches with hooks, and they'll be out in the sun for days on end, fasting, no water. They'll do sweat lodges on top of all that. So they are like so absolutely depleted on every level. And then they add like torture on top of that. And of course, it produces states of consciousness that are actually similar to what Sacredphrenics experience. Like you can't push the body to that level without inducing mystical states of consciousness. And that's part of their purpose. It's to help you get in touch with spirit. Like any really good initiation will put you in touch with the other side. Yeah, yeah, so I'm really glad you brought up those specific examples of like horrendous initiations. And like, yeah, as you said a minute ago, like this is not permission for anyone to go out and like hurt themselves or something like that. I mean, this needs to be done in a very secure container if it's done at all, but like with the right tribe.
Yeah, with the
This
main
is
focus being community.
Community,
Yeah,
yes.
because that's what it all evolves around at the end of the day, community. And
Mhm.
that's where a lot of our mental health problems come from. You know, like
Absolutely.
there's a guy called Johann Hari. Have you heard of him?
No, I don't think so.
He's got a class TED talk, and a book, and he says that depression comes from a lack of connection,
Hmm.
and the opposite of addiction is community.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So these initiations do need to be supported and conducted by a community, and you need to have that support to go to. Another sort of initiation is what Tibetans do is from a very young age, they allow their children to witness the dead, and they're very open about death, and they will like show their children the body after it is dead. And on top of that, they also have a strong community about it. So they will say a prayer on the first day, the seventh day, every seventh day, they will say a prayer in order for the spirit to pass on peacefully to the next world. And grief is so strife in our society, and it's one of those things that it's like it's not addressed. Like if someone dies, many people wouldn't tell anyone about it, they would just suffer alone.
Hmm.
Meanwhile, in other communities, people are together for a full 49 days where they don't leave each other's houses because they stick together that much, so they're able to come to terms with the trauma that is grief. But instead, we allow this trauma to build up inside of us.
Right.
Like, for example, whenever I was 3 or 4, my uncle died. And apparently I was very close with my uncle. But instead of my mom and dad telling me that my uncle had died, they sent me and my sister to my mom and dad's friend's house while they went to the funeral.
Hmm.
And so like I never had witnessed death until I was like 16, 15 or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And like I feel like that's a really important step for people to go through, like a small form of initiation, because it is a matter of life. Death is inevitable. There's no single person or thing on earth that has not or is not going to die.
Right.
We're all going to die. And if you look at any philosophy, they all address the matter that we should come to terms with the fact that we are going to die. And in fact, we should contemplate death, because by contemplating death, we're able to, accept the now and not worry about the past or the future, and instead live life to the full.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think you've touched on a really important aspect of this conversation that often goes unaddressed. And I think death is actually an integral part of the Sacredphrenia experience in one form or another. I mean, really, a person who undergoes such psychiatric chaos is experiencing a death of a certain form, like a death of their old self.
Yeah.
And in order to achieve higher states of consciousness, it's necessary for a person to undergo death and then rebirth. I mean, that's the classic initiation formula, is for death to take place and then to be followed by a second birth, a birth that is based within oneself and not necessarily within like the initial birth that we have is through a mother, which is you know, beautiful and necessary for life, but one has to eventually birth oneself, and before doing that one has to die. So yeah, I mean, I was actually obsessed with death for many years. That was a part of my torment, was not being able to make peace with the idea of death, the afterlife. You know, I was very afraid of what might exist in the afterlife, you know, not knowing what that terrain was and all that. And I'm really glad that you brought it up. I mean, you're right, we don't have enough community, and maybe that's one reason that people hear voices, is because they need community of some form. So in the absence of like true family and true community, they will get in touch with internal parts, you know, or spirits that will communicate with them, you know, community. So yeah, thank you for bringing that up. I mean, yes, we're a very death phobic culture, and it's one reason that I think that we're in trouble, and we need to get in touch with death in a much deeper way, and in a way that is part of like a wisdom tradition. Though, like, anybody can go out and like find a dead body and like poke it with a stick and like, yeah, what is that, you know, like that's one thing, that's fine, and that probably would teach you a lot. But like, we don't understand death as part of a tradition that like, we've lost touch. Like, Christianity no longer has, you know, real meaning for most of us. So I think it is time for new forms of religion to emerge that are also ancient, like that reacquaint us with ancient religions that did help us to process death in a healthy way as part of a community. Yeah, that's needed.
I think the religion of the future is omonism, where everyone reads every book on religion and they find their own meaning from the own text.
There's an idea.
Because there is a little bit of beauty in all religions, and a lot of them follow the same structures and the same visceral meaning behind it. Like, every single religion on earth, one of their main rules is to treat others the way you'd like to be treated. And unfortunately, a hierarchical system has been placed onto many religions, and a monetary system in which the likes of the Vatican is suffocating in wealth while there's poverty and homeless right at its doors. And it's this hierarchy and monetary system that has corrupted. And it happens within all industries. They all get corrupted by hierarchy and money. And so this is why we're seeing a rise in spirituality. And people are classifying it as spirituality because they don't want to identify with a religion because of the persecutions and the oppression that it has caused on societies throughout millennia.
Sure.
And spirituality is the only thing that actually resonates with them. And although you and me both disagree with labels. Ominism, according to Google, is the label for that.
Ominism is, how do you spell it?
OMNISM.
Okay. Ominism, huh?
O for Omega, M for Matta, N for Nevermind, I for Indigo, S for Sex, and M for Man.
Wow, if your religion, your new religion that you're the founder of, contains all of those things, sign me up. Although the man would ideally also include woman at the end. And in fact, that's one of the major missing pieces in most world religions, is that the divine feminine was cut out early on. And I think most of the mystical centers of these religions have retained the feminine, but those haven't been as popular. So anyway, we could get into a huge discussion about.
We could go deep into this. You know, Irish mythology is actually heavily based on the woman and the feminine, and like the woman is a very powerful figure, and all of the rivers in Ireland are named after like female gods.
Wow.
So from like Irish mythology dates back so far that before they had written language, and so they created a story for everything on the land. So like the River Shannon is the longest river in Ireland, and it goes through like Limerick up north, and like there's so many mythological stories that evolve around it. But yeah, all the rivers are after women. Same with the River Bann, and I don't know what other rivers are after women. But another huge Irish queen is Queen Maeve, and she was so powerful, and she's famous for starting the cow riots or something like that. So it wasn't actually called the cow riots, but the cow wars, where everyone stole cows off each other, and she went down to Ulster to try and get the biggest bull in the whole of Ireland.
Wow, that's epic.
Yeah, it's cool, man. Jacob, I'm gonna round this up with the final 3 questions for you. All right?
Love it.
So these 3 questions are gonna be like, just pretty fast, consecutive order.
Okay, like rapid fire.
Rapid fire. That was the one, mate. Yeah. So, question number 1. Name 3 things that you are grateful for today.
Wow. I'm grateful for this conversation. It's been incredibly fruitful.
So am I.
And enjoyable. Yeah. I am grateful for that men's group that I told you about.
Yeah.
It is really like holding my feet to the fire and causing me to like do my daily practice in a more enhanced way and be like really serious about it, more committed to my daily practice. And my awesome. and my work in general. And item number 3, let's see. I'm thankful for community. You've reminded me of the importance of community during this conversation. I mean, it's not a cliche thing at all. It's like one of the most necessary ingredients for health. In fact, health can't exist without it. And studies are showing this more and more, that a person's lifespan drastically decreases when they are deprived of this essential nutrient. And I'm really grateful, like specifically for the community that I have here in Reno, which has been it's been growing stronger and stronger every year, and lately, like some of my friends and I are envisioning ways in which we can evolve this community into like actual intentional community where we're living together in kind of an eco-village type of situation.
Wow.
I mean, that's like what we need. That's what the earth needs.
That's the
community,
dream, baby.
community on that deep level. So thanks for that. Yes, those are my 3 things.
Beautiful. Quickly, would you like to add what daily practices that your men's group is helping you with following through?
Absolutely. So it's going to be changing throughout the 3 months, but right now we are doing yoga, like a daily yoga practice, physical yoga,
Nice.
daily breath work,
Lovely.
which can take so many different forms, but we're doing some Kundalini yoga breath work.
Cool.
There's a famous exercise called the ego eradicator that we've been doing.
Sounds
It's really,
interesting.
really awful.
Is it?
Yeah, it's like, it's, you know, it's worth it. It's tremendous in the benefits that it causes, but it's not very fun. And then meditation, of course, and journaling, checking in with the brotherhood, you know, like I think even for a person who is in a severe state of psychosis, like mild versions of every single thing that I just mentioned can be useful. Like, but they would want to go very slow. They would want to have a guide. If somebody is interested in learning more about any of these, of course they can reach out to me. I'm always happy to share, you know, the things that have helped me. I'm not like officially working as a health coach for such people right now, but I love to have conversations with people, and I love to support them in different ways. Yeah.
Awesome. I completely agree with you as well. All of those things helped me with my psychosis recovery too. And like you said, it's important to, you know, not rush it and not take too much of it, because if you suddenly go from doing nothing to doing all of those in one day, like, you burn out too easily. And you don't want to do that. You want to do it one small step at a time.
Yeah. And you want to make sure you have those foundational pieces in place, like a healthier diet, some form of therapy, or working through your psychological chaos, because a lot of those things we just mentioned are going to cause stuff to come up. And if you don't have any way of dealing with them, you know, you might have some difficulty. Yeah.
100%. Community and therapy, they're both necessities, I would say, in recovery. Okay, we got a bit sidetracked there, but question number 2, Jacob. What 2 goals do you want to achieve, either by the end of the week or by the end of the year? Maybe do like one for by the end of the week and one by the end of the year.
Wow. Well, it's perfect that you said the end of the year, because I do have this large goal that is to, I have this goal to launch the second phase of this project by the end of 2021. And actually, my goal for the end of the week is to create the timeline for how I'm going to accomplish that. Because it's one thing to say, I'm going to do this big thing, you know, in 3 months' time. It's another thing entirely to actually have like achievable milestones that you reach, you know, like by week 1, this has been done, and week 2, this. So like, I recently posted a story on my social media, like asking people to hold me accountable to this, because the entire year 2021, I've been like hinting at this idea of evolving Sacredphrenia into the next form, which is sad to say. Like I've benefited more from like creating this thing called Sacredphrenia over the last 3 years than just about anything. Maybe not as much as like having Sacredphrenia itself. That was like maybe the biggest thing. That was the biggest initiation. But like creating Sacredphrenia has been so juicy and so rich. And I also recognize that it's not the last stop. It's actually evolving into something else. And I can't say what that next thing is. Of course, I'll continue to speak about Sacredphrenia and use the word Sacredphrenia, but I don't think it's going to be the title of this project anymore. And I don't think it's going to be the central focus. I think it wants to branch out a little bit and to touch other domains. And actually, I can be a little more honest than that. I think I'm realizing that I am an artist, and I'm not necessarily, like, my biggest strength is not necessarily as a coach. So Sacredphrenia was originally like, the main thing is Jacob Reed coaches people. Now it's turning into like, I think I can help people in other ways. I think I can help people in creating videos and, you know, writing and things of that nature. And like occasionally consulting with people for sure. But yeah, that feels like a little more. So anyway, those are two goals that that I have right now.
Beautiful. So there's light over the horizon for you.
Oh yeah, there's so much light. Sometimes it's like too much. I have to put my sunglasses on.
Yeah, you gotta protect those eyes. So the final question for you, Jacob, is who is one person you'd like to let them know that you love them today?
Oh wow. Oh my gosh, this is a big one. Well, first of all, it has to be somebody who's going to watch this and make it
That
2
doesn't
hours.
have to be. It can be
Okay.
Anyone.
Right. And I can always tell this person, hey, by the way, you should go to you can go to 1 hour 53 minutes in. There's this message for you.
Or even better,
better,
don't tell them what time it's on, so
it's
just do the whole thing.
Right. I would have to say, especially because of the nature of this interview, I'm going to say I love you to my friend Michelle Renee. And the reason for that, well, there are a million reasons for me to say I love you to Michelle, but one of them, probably the biggest one, is that she is like I call her my healing twinsy, meaning like twin.
Mm-hmm.
We have both experienced Sacredphrenia. We have both been triumphant in overcoming its major challenges and come out the other side into more integrated whole people. And I don't tell her I love you often enough. Like I love her more than just about anybody on this planet. And she deserves hearing it in a public format like this. I can pronounce to the world my love for Michelle, because it is so deep. So I love you, Michelle. You are my dear, dear, dear friend. And it's wonderful to have the opportunity to say that. It's so cool.
Beautiful, man. I fucking love that energy. I can feel it radiating off you. Even though you're in Nevada and I'm in Ireland, I can feel the energy, man, transmuting through this electronic device I'm currently viewing on. I fucking love it. Class.
Dude, you have so much love too, my friend. It's like, it's emanating off of you. It's so full in this conversation. Like I'm so excited for both of us that we're in this place where we can step into our gifts. Yeah.
I'm also excited. Jacob, thank you so much, my friend. It's been an absolute pleasure, an honor. I'm so grateful for you taking the time to chat with me today. Where can people connect with you? So you've got a YouTube page, and that's called Sacredphrenia, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Sacredphrenia, spelled sacred, Sacredphrenia. Is that right?
You nailed it.
Fuck yeah.
Yep.
And
On most of the platforms, they'll find me under that name. So Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, those are the three main ones. And again, like the name is likely going to change in 3 months' time. I'm not going to reveal the new name, but They should still be able to find me if they search for Sacredphrenia or Jacob Reed on the internet. You know, they'll find me.
Fantastic. Well, people, get following Jacob. Excited to see what is to come in the future. And in the meantime, thank you, Leprechauns, for watching this. We'll see you soon.